Is Durham Region's housing market actually heading for a crash? That's what a lot of the headlines would have you believe. Lately, I've been seeing post after post claiming that distressed sales are exploding and that Durham's about to see a wave of power of sales listings drag prices down. So instead of relying on headlines or social media, I spent an afternoon digging through the MLS listing by listing to see what was actually happening. I wasn't trying to prove the headlines wrong. If the numbers supported a crash, that's exactly what I tell you. But that's not exactly what I found. In fact, June actually had more home sales this year than last year. Sellers are still getting about 99% of their asking price, and while power of sales listings are definitely increasing, they still represent only a very small percentage of the overall market. So let's look at the numbers together. I'm Villia Trulove, and I've been helping families buy and sell homes throughout Durham Region and Toronto for more than 20 years. If you're thinking about buying or selling, all of my contact information is in the description below. You can also download my free home buyer guide, which can help you get started with the process. Now, let's get into what I found. So before we get to the power of sales numbers that everyone's been asking about, I want to show you why the overall picture is actually the more important story right now by looking at the overall market through 2026 so far. So Durham started the year with just 412 home sales in January. That was a slower start than January 2025, which had 489 sales. But from there, the market steadily gained momentum each month until June, which reached 849 sales. Now, that seasonal increase from winter into spring is completely normal. What's more interesting is the year-over-year comparison. June 2025, Durham had 817 sales with an average price of about $891,000, and homes were selling for about 100% of asking price on average. This June, we had 849 sales, average price of $856,000, and sellers were still receiving about 99% of their asking price. So sales were actually up about 4% compared to last June. Average prices were down roughly 4%, or about $35,000, and sellers are still getting very close to what they're asking. To me, that's what a market that's adjusting and finding its balance looks like, not one that's completely falling apart. Inventory has also remained fairly consistent, sitting around 3.4 to 3.5 months of inventory for much of the year. Technically, that's still considered a seller's market, although it may not feel like that because we're not as competitive as we were a few years ago. Buyers have more options, and sellers do need to be more strategic. But that's a healthier or more balanced market in a lot of ways. So where are these scary headlines coming from? A lot of them are really Toronto stories. Toronto has a much larger investor-owned condo market than Durham does. Many investors who bought condos at the peak or financed them with variable rate mortgages have been feeling the pressure from higher interest rates. That's where many of these distressed sales stories are coming from. And Durham simply isn't built the same way. So if you're making decisions based on GTA-wide headlines, you might be looking at data that doesn't actually reflect what's happening right here. So that brings us to power of sales listings. Unfortunately, our real estate board doesn't publish official statistics showing exactly how many power of sales listings exist. So instead, I manually searched the MLS listing by listing. This isn't an official board report, it's my own research, but I do think it gives us a very good snapshot of what's happening. So before we look at today's inventory, I actually think one trend tells the story better than anything else. In June and July of 2024, I could only find 5 bank-owned homes that sold across the Durham region. During the same period in 2025, that increased to 16. And this year, as of July 20th, which is the day I did my research, I found 21. So yes, power of sale activity is definitely increasing. That's a trend worth watching, but context matters as well. 21 bank-owned sales spread over roughly 7 weeks in a market that's selling more than 800 homes in a month is still a relatively small number. Now, looking at what's currently available, no matter what price range I searched, power of sales listings consistently represented somewhere between 2% and 4% of all available inventory. In the 500 to 600,000 range, they made up about 4% of listings. From 600 to 800,000, about 3%. Between $800,000 and $1 million, again, about 3%, and above $1 million, roughly 2%. So not zero, but it's also nowhere near the flood that some headlines would have you believe. As a side note, if you'd like to see a current list of power of sale and bank-owned homes in the Durham region, I've actually put that together for buyers. There's a link in the description below where you can request the list. However, there's one important thing that buyers really should understand. Power of sale does not automatically mean an amazing bargain. Banks are not in the business of giving homes away. They're actually legally required to try to obtain fair market value. So if you're expecting to buy a $900,000 home for $500,000 simply because it's a power of sale, that's usually not how it works. There are also additional risks when purchasing a power of sale property that buyers need to understand. I won't go into all of those today because that could easily be a separate video. But if you'd like me to cover that topic, just let me know in the comments, and you can always reach out with any questions as well. To be honest, if one of my buyers came to me looking for the best value in today's market, I'd be more excited about a well-priced estate sale than a power of sale. Estate properties are often in better condition. They generally involve fewer legal complications, and sometimes they present better buying opportunities. If you'd like to learn more about that strategy, you can check out my Grandma House video right after this one. So why am I watching these numbers so closely? Because right now, they really are too small to influence the overall market. Today, there are roughly 66 active bank-owned listings across the Durham region. When you spread those listings across every community, every price range, and every type of property, they simply aren't numerous enough to pull down prices across the broader market. They're competing with the other listings, they're selling, but they're not setting market values yet. Could that change? Absolutely. Many homeowners who locked into historically low mortgage rates in 2020 and 2021 are renewing into significantly higher payments. If enough of those renewals create financial stress, power of sale inventory could continue to grow. If that happens, we could eventually reach a point where distressed sales begin affecting comparable sales. We're just not quite there today, but it's something I'll continue tracking closely over the coming months. To me, Durham still feels like two different markets. Well-priced family homes in desirable neighborhoods continue attracting buyers, and in some cases, even multiple offers. Meanwhile, overpriced homes, properties needing significant updates that aren't priced accordingly, and some investor-owned properties are taking much longer to sell, or they're just not selling at all. Pricing strategy has never been more important. If you're buying, you have more negotiating power, but also don't be surprised for a home to sell quickly if you're looking in a desirable area and if that home is priced well. You may still have to move quickly. If you're selling, preparation, presentation, and realistic pricing matter more than ever. So what's my biggest takeaway? The Durham market isn't as strong as it was a few years ago, but it's also nowhere near as weak as some of the headlines suggest. Sales are actually running slightly ahead of last year. Prices have adjusted, but they've remained relatively stable throughout 2026. Sellers are still receiving about 99% of their asking price on average. Power of sales are increasing, but they currently make up only about 2 to 4% of available inventory, which isn't enough to drive pricing across the Durham region. Like we said, could that change? Yes. Mortgage renewals are the biggest variable that I'll be watching over the next 12 to 18 months. If higher payments continue creating financial pressure, these numbers could eventually become much more meaningful. But today, the data simply doesn't support the idea that Durham is in the middle of a housing crash because of bank sales. The headlines are doing what the headlines do. My job is to look beyond them and to understand what's actually happening on the ground. If this video was helpful, I'd really appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. It helps more local buyers and sellers find accurate information about the Durham region. And if you'd like monthly updates based on real MLS data instead of sensational headlines, be sure to subscribe because I'll continue tracking these numbers and sharing what I find. I'd also love to hear from you. Have you noticed more power of sales listings lately? Or do you think that the headlines are exaggerating what's actually happening? Let me know in the comments below. Reach out anytime with any questions, or if you're ready to start your home buying or selling journey. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.